First of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you everyone for listening to this. I think it's an important story, especially right now in these times of this, what companies want to sell the world as this clean energy transition. First of all, I tell you where I live. I live in Northwest Ecuador. We're in the western slopes of the Western Andes. This is considered to be one of the most biologically diverse places of the whole planet. And my house is about 1,850 meters. And we have a large piece of land that we share with other owners that goes all the way to 2,800 meters. And this mountain habitat in the tropics are considered, especially botanically, within the Tropical Andes Biodiversity Hotspot, which is the most important biodiversity hotspot of the world. Now, very quickly, hotspots are areas in the world that are, scientists are saying we should be concentrating on saving because they're great biological importance. And I think it's important to know what is at stake here or what is threatened by mining. And Ecuador is so biodiverse that even though Brazil is 32 times larger than Ecuador, Ecuador has more species of, for example, orchids and butterflies than Brazil. And there are many more threatened species here in these mountain forests per similar land area than the more famous, well-known lowland Amazon rainforest. So how did I end up here? I was just a traveler, and I was traveling through South America and just about all South America. And from what I saw I liked Ecuador the most because it's cultural diversity and biodiversity. And from what I saw in Ecuador, I like this area more. It's called Intag because it's very mountainous, a lot of forest, a lot of clean rivers. The people were very welcoming, and the cloud forest, which is the forest right in front of my house, is spectacularly beautiful. So a combination of these cultural factors, biological factors, the scenery made me look for a home here. And I live in the forest, and I settled here in 1979. So for the first 16 years, I planted coffee. I still have coffee. I tried to live off the land. My land is mostly forested. Maybe there's about 5% we use for agricultural products. So for the first 16 years, we had some cattle also, very few. And that's the kind of livelihood we were doing until 1995. So what happened in 1995 is that we heard that there was a mining company working about 2.5 hours from here by car, but it's only like 15 kilometers in a straight line. And no one knew anything about what these people were doing in this forest, the Junin forest. So we had a meeting here at my place to try and find out what was happening and try to come up with a response to that threat. So from that meeting was born the organization called DECOIN, Defensa y Conservación Ecológica de Intag. And I'm still working for DECOIN. And this is 27 years later, and we're still confronting mining companies. Now, our first struggle was against Vichy Metals that was here because of a government-to-government international agreement, supposedly for development. In other words, the Japanese government was supposed to help Ecuador develop its mining industry. which is why Mitsubishi was in our forest. Mitsubishi Metals, by the way, was the subsidiary of Mitsubishi. And right away, we come up to a very interesting phenomenon, which is this vision of what development is. And it's an issue that runs through the whole struggle. All these 27 years has been this clash of visions, which happens not only in Ecuador, but all over the world, and is going to happen a lot more now that all these companies are looking for these minerals that supposedly will help the world transition to a clean energy future. Yeah, so you can actually condense the whole issue by saying that there's too many people in the world that have this vision of what development and well-being should be, based on a lot of capitalist beliefs and values, which says that making money is the most important thing that we could do. And society gives you credit for that, more than protecting the environment. I mean, it's a very simplistic way to look at it. And there's a lot, obviously, there's a lot to that. But that kind of vision is what brought this mining conflicts to INTAC, this clash of vision. And to give you a more concrete idea, that vision, the dominant economic development vision, sees the value of the copper in the subsoil. That's all it sees, how much money the government can generate from the copper in the subsoil. It does not see the other wealth that's on top of the topsoil, the forest, the balanced climate, the clean water, the clean air, the protection of rivers so there's no flooding. So now, interesting enough, one of the values that this dominant development model is pushing is basically saying we need to balance the climate and we need to get these minerals, copper, nickel, lithium, cobalt, and so on. And for some reason, no one's asking what will be the impacts, the social, cultural, ecological impacts of extracting these minerals to create supposedly a cleaner world. No one's asking those questions. And to give you the concrete idea of the area where I live and the wealth that is threatened by this kind of mentality, if there is a large-scale copper mine in these forests, that's what's being planned, it will destroy pre-Columbian archaeological site. It will destroy 43 sources of rivers and streams, primary forest, dozens of endangered species of animals and plants that are in process of extinction. It will violate human rights. It will relocate whole communities. All that to gain access at the copper, laying underneath all this wealth. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's ironic that in order to comply with one of the SDGs, you're going to trample and null many others, and it's kind of depressing that not enough people are questioning that. Yeah, so this is that. So when we fight these mining companies, and Mitsubishi Metals left in 1998 after the communities rejected that model of development. Yeah, ever since Mitsubishi left, we've been fighting the same actors or the same factors, which is this incredible perverse vision of what development and well-being should be, and not valuing all the wealth that's in a site, but only what's in the subsoil. First it was Mitsubishi, then the Canadians came in 2004, and now we're fighting yet another mining company, the world's largest copper producer, Codelco. That, I mean, it's a very long story because it is 27 years, and the Canadians also left after the communities put up a terrific and sometimes violent fight. They left in about 2009, 2010, so they were here 6 years. And now Codelco's been in the communities since 2013, which is already 9 years, and they have not been able to develop a mine yet. Now, one of the more interesting things about our struggle here is that civil society was able not only to say, no, we don't want mining, but we were also able to organize like never before. We have all these organizations in Intag, and just about all of them have the same vision of what well-being should be and what development should be. And there should be a kind of development that actually meets most of those SDG goals. No poverty, no hunger, good health and well-being, good education, gender equality, clean water, et cetera, et cetera. So all these organizations in Intag were created as a response to mining, and we're actually working to live up to these goals. For example, what have we done? We're promoting tourism, nature-based tourism or ecological tourism. We actually help the community that's right by the mining site develop a tourism project, which then the mining companies came and took over the land that we bought for them. But we're also promoting shade-grown coffee. We're with other organizations, they're promoting very small-scale hydroelectric controlled by the communities without any dams. We're promoting ecological agriculture. We're promoting sustainable handicrafts production. All these are in harmony with the SDGs of the United Nations. So I'm just looking at some of the SDGs here. For example, mining, and I'm talking about large scale, open pit, large scale mining in this primary forest that are protecting dozens of species in danger of extinction and pristine rivers and streams. Mining would impact SDG 13, which is climate action. That deforestation will dry up some of our climate, according to actually the BC Metals environmental impact study. Number 15 is life on land. Of course, it would destroy biodiversity. And the more biodiversity we destroy, the less resilient ecosystems are, which means that the ecosystems will be less able to capture CO2. Number 12 is responsible consumption and production. Where do you think all of this copper will go? Do you think it will stay in Ecuador? Will it help Ecuadorians? All of the copper is going to go overseas, mostly to China. Japan, by the way, imports 100% of its copper. So who is going to consume the products made from the copper that are dug out of these primary mountains and streams? And more important, what product will be made from this copper? Now, I am all in favor that we need to stop using hydrocarbons. I think any reasonable person is in favor of that. However, shouldn't we set priorities on what these minerals should be used for? Should they go to make private vehicles? or should the priority be to make mass public transportation cleaner and cleaner production of electricity? The last in line should be private vehicles. But right now there's a rush to make all these electric vehicles, which is completely insane. There is not enough minerals. We know there's not enough minerals to have everybody drive a electric car, and also enough minerals to make electricity clean for the whole world and not just the privileged people in the north. So it's kind of a global insanity to believe that electric vehicles will solve the climate crisis. Far from the truth. So one of the more important goals for me, number 12, will be completely null and void. Responsible consumption, that's key, because one of the issues is driving the planet to this ecological crisis is this overconsumption of materials. And if you think about how much destruction will take place to make all these new products, and again, the main issue is the consumption pattern. That's the main problem the world has, that 15% of the world's population, which is the rich OECD countries, are consuming most of the world's materials and most of the world's fuels. If we don't change that pattern, this transition is not going to solve anything. It's just going to create other problems. Biodiversity crisis, water crisis, and so forth. So we need to change the system and not just change minerals. I have students come here from the US mostly, but also we do have groups sometimes from Japan to visit my farm. One of the things I do point out to the visitors is how we are all involved in the environmental crisis, not only climate, but environmental crisis, by how we consume and how we look at nature. I also asked my guests to reflect on how people just purchase things without really thinking where they're coming from and not really caring. So when they come here, they have a chance to actually see where some of these materials will be coming from. They see this beautiful forest in front of me, and I tell them, forests just like these are being destroyed all over the world to access these minerals that are supposedly going to make a better world. And so the path to self-discovery needs to happen very quickly for people to take responsibility and be aware of how our lifestyle is destroying these biological and cultural jewels all over the world. In this 27-year-old fight to stop mining development, we, as civil society, and we meaning the organization I work with, because we have been the most active in stopping mining development, we have tried everything. The latest tactic we tried was taking the government to court. I don't know if you had a chance to talk about the constitutional rights of nature, but Ecuador is the only constitution that gives nature rights. It's a subject instead of an object. And we used, that's one of our arguments, to say to the government, mining will violate the rights that nature has in the Constitution. And one of the main arguments is that there are species that live in a mining site that live nowhere else in the world. They're endemic only to the mining site. So we're saying to the judge, mining will cause these species to become extinct. And that would violate the rights of nature to prosper and to reproduce itself and to have healthy cycles of the ecosystem. So that's one of the arguments that we use in this lawsuit. Yeah, these two species are frogs, and they were found, one in 2016 that thought to be extinct, and the other one was 2019, and it turns out to be a new species to science. Now, I don't know about Japan, but all over the world, there's this disease that's wiping out whole populations of frogs. To find areas in the world that there's still healthy populations of frogs is really important. Now, besides these two frogs that are endemic to the mining site, there's about 16 other species of frogs, and there's also one of the most endangered monkey species in the whole world. There's pumas, there's bears, there's a critically endangered fish species. The list of endangered species, only with this one 5,000 hectare mining site, there are dozens of these endangered species. So this is just one of the things, the values, the wealth that will be lost if mining goes ahead in these areas like these. Now, would you buy a car if you knew that the copper or the nickel or cobalt, lithium, are coming from areas like these that would destroy this kind of habitat, or areas where mining would force communities off their land, therefore human rights abuse? Would you buy a product made from these minerals? I don't think you would. So what the companies are doing right now is they're coming up with new ways to greenwash their products, to say that they belong to these responsible mining initiatives. There's a few of them: Copper Mark, Responsible Copper Initiative, the Lithium Initiative, the Cobalt, Responsible Cobalt Initiative. So they want to make you believe that their minerals to make these products, like cars and telephones and so on, are coming from these mining areas that are sustainably managed, environmentally, socially, and sustainably managed, which in raw terms, in most cases, it'll be bullshit. It's really important, and I see some people from Friends of Earth. I think a lot of these better known organizations need to work quickly on setting up a guideline or establishing these no-go zones for mining not to take place, because we stand a really good chance of actually worsening the environmental crisis by supposedly fixing the climate crisis. So we need to get together and come up with a set of guidelines for companies and for governments to say, keep off these areas, no mining in these sites. Civil society here in Ecuador, and I was part of that process, we came up with a list of these sites. For example, there should be no mining where communities do not consent to mining after being properly informed. There should be no mining in sacred lands where there are species of danger of extinction, where there is a great potential for sustainable economic activity like ecotourism. These are just some of the examples that we came up with. So this is what we're fighting for. And to go back to the lawsuit, which is very interesting, Ecuador's had a few win cases for the rights of nature. The government is very worried about our case, however. And one of the reasons is because our case, if we win, it would have consequences for the whole mining industry in the country. So the court hearing just happened about 2.5 weeks ago. And there, we were able to see who we really are up against. It wasn't just the Ministry of the Environment that we took to court, or the Ministry of Mining, essentially. Who were defending mining was not only those two ministries, but also the Ministry of Finance, the Attorney General, the lawyers from the President of Ecuador's lawyers was also defending mining. So were three transnational mining companies and the Chamber of Mining. All these people were against the four campesinos from the communities that were fighting for the rights of nature and for their rights to be consulted before mining would happen. There you see that you're really fighting not just one mining company, but the power structure. And one of the reasons, well, the main reasons the government is worried is because if we win, it means that it'd be very hard for mining to take place in most of Ecuador, because a lot of Ecuador this is such a biodiverse country that you can find endangered species just about everywhere. Now, to help the four campesinos from the communities, we also had help from experts and allies, including from PARC, that help with Friends of the Court submissions to support our side of the arguments that this place should not be subject to mining. We have many very good witnesses in our favor, but unfortunately, the case was decided before it went to court, the way I looked at it. So we got a negative ruling a few weeks ago, and we already appealed the case to the provincial court, but we don't know when it's going to be heard. But we're confident that we will win sooner or later, perhaps in the equivalent of the Supreme Court. Yeah, so one of the issues here in Ecuador, and I think many countries in the developing world, is that the courts are not necessarily very independent or objective. So I was looking at this judge, the lower court judge, and I saw him as being intimidated by all these ministries and the lawyers of the president of Ecuador arguing in favor of mining. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure. And the government feels it must win, no matter what it takes. They must win. So it was actually very difficult to watch how those lawyers representing the mining interest were intimidating the judge over and over again. And so it's very likely we will lose because there is no real independence, and because there's so much money at stake if the government loses. This is why the international support is so vital, and for us to come up with a set of guidelines to pressure the companies not to go and exploit places like these. Yeah, so right now we're in the process of appealing the case, and next Monday we got some funding together, and we hired more biologists to go into this new area of primary forest where Codelco would like to mine, and we're hoping to find new species, perhaps new species endangered that are not included in the environmental impact study, so we can make a stronger case in the appeal and eventually in the Constitutional Court. In Ecuador, these cases are supported by a strong communicational campaign where we, just like the government and the mining companies are pressuring the judges, with NGOs here in Ecuador, we're also doing this publicity campaign in favor of the frogs, in favor of INTAG, in favor of the 27-year-old struggle. So this is happening right now. In a way, it's trying to, I think in English it's called making the playing field more even. Right now, in these struggles, and not only in Ecuador, all over the world, it's very uneven, the fight. The government and transnational mining companies on one side, communities over here. We need to make the playing field a little bit more even so we stand a little bit of a chance of winning. So we do that by creating more scientific information and also by telling the world what's really going on. So this is our strategy right now. I just want to finish by making this reflection, because people ask me, I'm 71 years old. I've been fighting this stupid mind since I was, what, 45 or 40, yeah. And so people ask me, how is it possible for people like me, I'm not the only one, to keep going? And it always surprises me, because I feel to be part of this community, not only social community, but a biological community. I am part of this forest. We are all part of ecological community, whether we know it or not. And I think I'm a responsible human being. As a responsible part of a community, if my community is threatened, the most natural thing in the world is to defend it, don't you think? So that's all I'm doing. I'm acting like a responsible part of a biological community. And I hope that we all become aware of that. And then we find ways to get involved in defending our community. And it's really that this biological community is part of a much greater biological community, which is the biome, which is our planet. So becoming aware of that will make us find a way to get involved in defending this beautiful planet of ours.